Which NFL division is the best entering the 2024 NFL season? What's going on, BLV football fans? It's Mitch back here with another NFL rankings video, and in this video, I rank each and every NFL division from the worst to the best. Debating the strengths, the weaknesses, the sleeper wildcard teams, the favorites, and the worst teams in every NFL division, giving you my ranking for which divisions in the AFC and the NFC are the worst, which are the strongest, and which, they're just okay. If that sounds good, don't forget to spike the like button and subscribe for more NFL rankings videos all off season long. I think this video is especially important right before the schedule comes out because we can understand how good your opponents are, your common opponents, the teams that you play twice a year in your own division, and which divisions are going to be more difficult to actually make your way through and make the playoffs. There's one thing that you might notice on the graphics, and that is a number beside the name of the division. That means the score of each team combined into the overall score of the division based on my post-draft power rankings. I use this in order to rank each division, but also give me perspective about how I felt about each team individually, giving me a combined score for the entire division. All right, enough talk. Let's go. Let's begin with the worst division in pro football in 2024. It remains the NFC South as the number 8 division, scoring the worst combined grade in my post-draft power rankings. I actually didn't think the NFC South would be the worst division just thinking about it on the surface. I thought, okay, Atlanta got better, Tampa is about the same, New Orleans is about the same, and Carolina got better. So you would have thought that the South may be a little bit better in 2024. And realistically, it's hard to imagine that the worst division in football last year is probably going to be the worst division this year. Part of the reason that each team in the division had some success besides the Panthers is because the division was so bad and it was so competitive. So that's part of the reason they maybe picked up a couple extra wins. But the South remains the worst. I don't think there's a definitive team that's above the rest. There's certainly no powerhouse or juggernaut within the division, which keeps them at the bottom. I think there are 3 teams that could probably win this division. Atlanta, with Kirk Cousins leading the way. I think Atlanta has a strong offensive line. I think Atlanta has a dynamic backfield duo in Bijan and Tyler Algier, expecting Bijan to do big things this season, maybe being one of the game's best running backs. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, the signing of Darnell Mooney, they certainly have the firepower if Kirk Cousins is healthy off that Achilles to put up some points. And I really like the new and improved coaching staff, and I say improved with an underline. I think Raheem Morris is a drastic upgrade in terms of leadership over Arthur Smith. I think Zach Robinson is going to be a dynamic play caller and offensive magician for the Falcons. And I do think their defense is not great, but Morris has proven that with a couple pieces here and there, AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates, Grady Jarrett, etc., that he can put together a defense that is competitive and at least not one of the worst in the league. So I look at Atlanta and I could definitely see where they would finish first. But I could also debate that about Tampa Bay. Tampa has won the division multiple years in a row. Tom Brady or no Tom Brady, it didn't matter as they picked up Baker Mayfield for cheap. Now they have remained with Baker Mayfield as their franchise quarterback on a new, fresh contract. But what I love about the Bucs this year is that they didn't just, stay the same. They've actually improved a couple of areas of their team, and they've also made some necessary moves to the offense and the defense. I think they've improved their offensive line with obviously their first-round pick. I think they've drastically improved that center position thanks to Graham Barton, who I think is going to be a really good football player for them almost instantly. He's going to improve the athleticism. He's going to improve, I think, the run game. And Tampa has really not had a good center in years since Ryan Jensen was injured. Tristan Wirfs is a stud. They have a couple of guys that are just getting a little bit more experience on the right side of the offensive line. And then Mike Evans, Chris Godwin are still there. You add McMillan from Washington in the draft. That should add some depth along with Palmer and others. You still got Cade Otton. Rachaad White is looking like a borderline top 10 running back. He can do it all out of the backfield, and Baker is still there. The question will be offensive coordinator and if he can truly replace what was lost with the new Carolina head coach, of course, Dave Canales, who was awesome for Tampa last year and has been very good in previous locations, upgrading the quarterback play like Seattle, right? So I see Tampa maybe having some issues in their scheme offensively, but they have enough talent to kind of overcome that and still be at least an average unit. Defensively, they're pretty strong always under Todd Bowles. They always know how to stop the run. They've got enough big people up front to be able to do that. Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey, I think, is one of the most underrated interior duos in football. I think that their edge rush is probably about the same, hopefully maybe a little bit better. Diaby enters year 2. And then you've got the back end, which obviously Winfield, congratulations on your new contract. Absolute stud of a safety. You have to worry about the corner position without Carlton Davis, but I do think that there are others that can make up for it, like the re-addition of Whitehead, who I think they've been missing for years. His ability to make plays in the box as an extra linebacker type, his ability to get in the backfield as a blitzer, that's going to lessen the load of Antoine Winfield to play more in the deep area of the field, possibly even the nickel position. So that's an intriguing option for them. But I think Tampa's got a pretty solid defense, a pretty solid offense, a pretty well-rounded team with, a good defensive coach. I'm intrigued to see if they can keep this division theirs. If not, I think they're just, probably an average team in most simulations, but I could see them still winning the division. So it's interesting. The Saints are another team that could win this division. The Saints are strong, I think, on defense. Offense is a bit of a question mark, but their defense certainly has been pretty consistent under Dennis Allen, who is one of the better coordinators in football when it comes to getting a defense prepared, having confusing coverage looks, and, sending kind of pressure and blitzes from different angles. They've always had foundational players of Cameron Jordan, Demario Davis, Marshawn Lattimore, and really foundational players at every level. You do wonder about the age of some of these players, but they have seemingly added a couple players that might help them out as well, like Chase Young and like Willie Gay at the linebacker level. So this defense, I think, they even added Kool-Aid from the draft. I'm not exactly sold on him, but they've added guys at every level to help them out. There's also younger guys that are kind of making their names mean something in the NFL, like Brzee, for example. So the Saints could still be a pretty good defense. I don't think they're going to be dominant, but I would not be surprised if they were a top 10 unit. The offense, I think, is going to be hit and miss and up and down. I think Derek Carr just in general is that way, but I think Alvin Kamara is going to be, again, a little bit step slower once again this year. He just seems to be kind of deteriorating season by season. He's not a bad player by any means. He's certainly not still a starting running back and not still probably a top 15 player at that position, but he's just not able to carry the load. He's a guy that probably is going to be more of the pass catcher variety, probably going to need some help from the other backs in those short yardage situations and getting those drives started and grinding out football games. The offensive line is going to be a big question mark. What does the new rookie bring to the table? Can Ryan Ramczyk stay healthy? Will he retire? I don't even know. The rest of the offensive line is just kind of mid. McCoy can be pretty good at times. And the receiving core, can Rashid Shaheed really provide some magic? Because Chris Olave has been the only consistent guy as of late. And I'm not really sure what they're going to get from the depth of this position. So I view all three of those teams as teams that I think can compete for the division. I could maybe even see, in an ideal world for the South here, as the worst division in football, to maybe even send two teams to the playoffs in the NFC. That almost happened last year. So I wouldn't be shocked if, let's say, Atlanta and Tampa and New Orleans and Atlanta both made the playoffs. What would shock me if it's really Carolina was any good, period. Now, Carolina, I do think, won't be an embarrassment. They won't be the worst team in football. They won't have the first overall pick 3 years in a row. I definitely don't think that's going to happen. But I still don't see them being competitive to win the division. I think their offensive line is actually pretty strong on paper now. And that has a good foundation for both Bryce Young and Dave Canales, the new head coach, to work with. I think their run game should be potentially pretty interesting. Led by, we'll see, right? Is it going to be Brooks, who is coming off of an injury as a rookie, but a high priority draft pick? Is it going to be, Chuba Hubbard, the Canadian? Is it going to be Miles Sanders? I would expect Hubbard would get most of the carries early on, and potentially Brooks could steal his job later in the season. The offensive line, though, with Hunt, with Lewis, with, the guys they have there, Taylor Moton, they should be able to provide good protection and a good ground game for Bryce Young. But how good is Bryce Young going to be? He definitely has some support around him. Deontay Johnson is going to get open, run crisp routes, and make some plays when he's not dropping the ball, that is. I do feel like Adam Thielen and Xavier Legette will be able to make plays in different ways, shapes, and form. Legette could be a good yards after catch option and a downfield stretcher. Deontay Johnson will be that intermediate route runner. And then Adam Thielen kind of is that steady presence from the slot, running option routes, feeling out zone coverage, working the middle of the field. That's how I think Adam Thielen's going to continue to win in another year where he should be productive. The defense, I don't think is going to be very good. I'm concerned about the defense. I don't really look at it and say they don't have a great pass rush. If you're counting on Jadeveon Clowney and DJ Wonnum to be your best pass rushers, that's a bit concerning to me, especially if you don't have a Mike McDonald type scheming up pressure. I feel like the defensive coordinator, I'm not a hater. I definitely think he's fine, but they just don't have a lot of superb players. I think that Derek Brown is a really solid, rock solid defensive tackle. He is a beast against the run, and he penetrates like an animal, but I don't think he's a guy that takes over football games. I do feel like the linebacker position is Shaq Thompson's getting older and kind of injured. They brought in Josie Jewell. They've got some pieces there, but it's nothing special. I think the secondary, if J.C. Horn can stay healthy, makes them interesting. I like the Fuller pickup. Woods is solid, but they don't got a lot of game changers in the secondary either, unless J.C. Horn ascends to an elite level. So I kind of view them as an offense that I'm kind of waiting to see what they can be. I could see them being average. I could see Bryce having by far a better year this year, but I also could view them still struggling in a lot of ways. Until I'm really bought in on Bryce Young, I can't really put my chips in the middle of the table with them. And then defensively, I just view them as a bottom 10 unit. Even if they're not terrible, I just don't see how they have the potential to be great, because I don't see the pass rush. I don't see the coverage either way being dominant in any regard. So the NFC South, still the worst division, but definitely some different angles of attack. And I definitely feel like a really interesting division nonetheless, even with the lack of overall talent. There's 3 teams that can maybe make the playoffs here, and one team that definitely should be better in 2024. The second worst division in the NFL entering 2024 might surprise some people due to their reputation, but once you think about it, it's kind of obvious. The NFC East. The NFC East scores an 81 on my overall scale, and this is a 2-team division. It's a split right down the middle. 2 teams are pretty good. 2 teams kind of suck. It's clear as day. It's very obvious. And there should really be no reputation change in 2024. So let's begin with the good. Philadelphia, I think, should be the favorite of this division, given the talent they have and now the coaching staff that they've assembled, along with the fact that Dallas has lost some key pieces and a key coach. So Philadelphia, I think, has the best offensive line by a wide margin in this division. I think that they have arguably the best defensive line. I wouldn't say that it's definitive, because Dallas has a couple really, really good players that kind of make up for maybe the lack of depth, but Philly might have the best defensive line. They probably have the best receiving core in this division. They might have the best, they definitely have the best running back in this division. They probably have the best tight end in this division. They probably have the best general manager who can make some tweaks during the middle of the year in this division. They probably have, a quarterback that is capable of being the best in this division. I wouldn't say that he is the best. I actually think Dak is better, but it's not by a lot. I would also say that the secondary of Philly, that was a big weakness last year, might be the most improved unit in the division. So when you just break it down like that, Philadelphia is pretty loaded. There are not a lot of problems with them. There's some nitpick issues. Like, okay, how is Kellen Moore's offense going to really look? How much of an improvement is it going to be? As a guy that typically has ran his offenses from under center, that has not been the Philadelphia way. Will he kind of get into his Boise State bag and have them run a lot of spread stuff, or will he kind of implement a mixed style of what the Eagles have done in the past under Shane Steichen, and then kind of what he did in Dallas and LA? Kind of the interesting tie there is that obviously Shane Steichen was with Herbert at a previous stage in his career. Then he went to Philly, right? And then obviously Kellen Moore was with the Chargers with Herbert last year. So there's kind of some interesting ties. I wonder how much that kind of correlated to him getting the job, or if it was just an impressive, kind of resume for him coming from Dallas and kind of the Eagles wanting some of that Dallas stuff to come to Philadelphia, and then his familiarity with Dallas also helping them beat Dallas. So there's some of that stuff as well. I think Vic Fangio, though, is the best hire they made in terms of like correlating a defense that makes sense. I think now Vic Fangio, he's got a safety, he's got a corner to work with, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell. It's going to allow him to have flexibility with the other players on the depth chart. Like, how is he going to use James Bradbury? Is he even going to be on the roster? Is he going to match up with some of the bigger receivers in the slot maybe? Or is he going to, how is he going to move around these players? Cooper DeJean, is he going to play nickel? Is he going to play safety? Is he going to play perimeter corner? Like they drafted, I believe it was Brown last year at safety. Is he going to be like their big nickel, or is he going to be a safety? So they've got a lot of versatility there. The linebackers are pretty crap, I'm not going to lie, but I do feel like with the versatile safety and secondary aspects, along with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who's another hybrid nickel safety, you can do a lot of different things. Fangio's going to be able to find a lot of different coverages and ways to mix it up in the back end. And the defensive line is very, very solid, led by, I think, a stud in Jalen Carter. I think Sweat is a very good player, and I think that what they're going to get from Huff is probably a 10-sack type of guy. He's not super versatile or great against the run, but he is an awesome pass rusher. So they're going to get pressure on the quarterback, and their secondary should be faster, younger, fresher, and their scheme should be more tied together. So overall, I just view the Eagles as a more buttoned up operation with more creativity, more flow, more rhyme and reason. And obviously we know their offense is superbly talented. It can uplift maybe a limited scheme with a very solid offensive line, even post Jason Kelce, an awesome explosive runner in Saquon, two awesome receivers, an excellent tight end who can block and catch, and Jalen Hurts, who's a dynamic weapon in both the pass and the run game. So the Eagles, to me, are the most complete overall talented team in the NFC East. I will be picking them to win this division this year, and that will not change. The Dallas Cowboys, I think, are still borderline playoff type of team, and I think I might still pick them to make the playoffs, although I have to think that through. But Dallas has aspects that I still think I can rely on. I can rely on Micah Parsons to get to the quarterback. I can rely on Dak to be a pretty good, player, especially in the regular season. CeeDee Lamb is excellent, and he demands a ton of attention, which opens up the rest of the offense. I think that Ferguson is a solid tight end. Brandon Cooks is a professional number 2 receiver. I think that the offensive line, Tyler Smith is really, really good. Zach Martin is really, really good. There's aspects that I can get behind. They always seem to coach up the offensive line at a pretty solid level. And defensively, I still think they have a majority of the same parts that they had last year. Trayvon Diggs returns, which is a huge boost. DeMarcus Lawrence is still really good. Micah Parsons might be the best defensive player in the entire sport, right? They do have some weaknesses. Linebacker, to be specific. I think the defensive line and the beef of the run game defense is a little, kind of murky. I think Odigizua is really, really good, but he's more of a pass rusher type. And then the secondary, I still think that they'll be pretty darn good covering people. Will Bland have how many interceptions or whatever he did last year? Probably not. But he's still ascending to be a pretty darn good number 2 corner, if not a number 1 in his own right. So they've got a lot of pieces to work with there in Dallas on both sides of the ball. It's just not as deep of a team, not as reliable in terms of, I know what Tyron Smith was going to be. I kind of knew what Tyler Biadasz was going to be. I kind of knew what Stephon Gilmore was going to bring. There's things that are kind of missing in terms of that reliability. Also, Dan Quinn to Mike Zimmer is a big difference in terms of how the defense might look, the different types of defenses they may be playing, the different types of pressures they may be sending, and how does that correspond with the personnel. That's an entirely different conversation. So Dallas just has a lot more question marks to them this year than I think they have had in the last couple of years, which makes them not as reliable. I just don't think they're as talented either, just straight up, as they have been the last couple of years. But I still think they're pretty competent. So that still makes the NFC East pretty challenging. Then you've got the Washington Commanders and the New York Giants. And you could argue either way to which team is better. To me personally, I think the Giants are better, just in terms of I like Brian Daboll and I like this coaching staff more than I like Washington's coaching staff. I also think that Daniel Jones is, when he's on the field, probably going to be better than a rookie quarterback. I mean, probably. When we look at Daniel Jones 2 years ago, he was solid. Like, he got the job done. He ran the offense efficiently. His legs were a big part of their production, and he didn't turn the ball over very much, right? The offensive line is the best it's been in a while in New York. And then on top of that, you've got the best wide receiver 1 you've had in a while in Malik Neighbors, who I think is going to be an instant 1,000-yard receiver in this league. I think that Brian Daboll is going to find a number of different ways to get him the football, similarly to how he did with Stephon Diggs in Buffalo. I think that the run game won't be as electric, but still pretty effective. And I just think the reliance of an offensive line that might actually be a little bit more cohesive with better coaching and better personnel is going to help them drastically lift the floor of this offense. Defensively, I like the defensive coordinator change and who they hired there. I also like having Brian Burns alongside Thibodeau on one edge and then Dexter Lawrence in the interior. I wish they would have kept Xavier McKinney, but I still like aspects of the secondary, including Banks entering year 2. I still think they're weak there, but I don't think they're horrendous necessarily. So I think the Giants will be competitive. I think they're going to be well coached, well schemed. I think they're going to go in with good game plans each and every week. And I think it kind of comes down to, can their pass rush get home and can their offense control the football? I think once they get behind in games, it's going to be really difficult for them to win. But I view the Giants as a competitive, not very good team. With the Commanders, I view them as a rebuilding team. Like, I kind of see them as, one of the lower end teams in football because I think their offensive line is still pretty bad, even with the additions and the changes that they've made. I think that the run game, I don't see it being very consistent under Cliff Kingsbury, especially with the offensive line in front of these running backs that are kind of average. Austin Eckler has definitely lost a step. And Brian Robinson, he's just okay in my book. I think the receivers are solid, but, it's really 2 guys right now for the Commanders that make stuff happen, and Dotson is still relatively unproven. Kingsbury and how that's going to work with Jaden Daniels, who I'm not the biggest Jaden Daniels guy, so that might change your opinion on Washington, but I think he's going to struggle as a rookie with, making plays outside of structure, throwing the football. I think he's going to struggle with the pressure that the Commanders might not be able to kind of reliably protect him from. And I also believe that their run game is going to be pretty inefficient. But he will probably have some big throws down the field. And if they can get their receivers some separation, I think he can operate an offense with a lot of screens, a lot of underneath passes to get him going and get the offense flowing, use his legs to get out in space to create some magic. And then I think it's just going to have to be a very well coordinated and sequenced offense in order for them to create a lot in year 1 with the current stable of talent that they have. Defensively, I think that I like the hire in terms of Dan Quinn being the defensive guy. I don't love him as the head coach, but I think that they're going to be improved in terms of their scheme, in terms of the difficulty they bring opposing offenses. I just kind of feel like they don't have a ton of talent. The secondary is very unproven and lacking, a lot of certified studs at safety and corner. There's guys that I like, but I don't view anyone as a certifiably, just I know what I'm going to get from him. Frankie Louvu is one of my favorite signings of the offseason. I think he's going to make a major difference in terms of the blitz coordination of what Dan Quinn brings from the edge or the inside. I think Bobby Wagner was a nice leadership signing. I think that Dorrance Armstrong uplifts what they had at the end of last year in terms of their edge rush. Obviously, Jonathan Allen and the big man inside are going to do damage just penetrating the pocket. But I don't think Washington has a very talented defense on the surface. I think a lot of it's going to have to come from scheme and those two guys inside, Payne and Allen, bringing the pain. So the Commanders, the Giants, not a lot of talent there. And a new regime for the Commanders working their way up. The Giants are just trying to kind of create a floor and kind of almost a bridge year of going from Daniel Jones to another option in the future. That's what it kind of feels like to me. The Cowboys might make the playoffs, might miss the playoffs. The Eagles, I think, will win the division. That's kind of how I see the East, and that's where they land as the second worst division in football. The third worst division in the NFL entering 2024, or number 6 on our countdown, is our first AFC division. It is the home of your Super Bowl champs, the Kansas City Chiefs, the AFC West, scoring a 79, pretty darn close to the NFC East. This division is a one-team division with a couple average teams, in my opinion, and one bad team. Now, what allows the West of the AFC to be ahead of an NFC East, because some people might say, the Cowboys and the Eagles, that's more competitive than the Chiefs and the, I don't know, right? Yeah, I agree. But the Chiefs being like arguably the best team in football, that's what allows the West to be above the East. And you never know. We might actually have a surprise team from the AFC West. I don't really see that in the NFC East. I could see the Chargers or the Raiders surprising some people this year. I would probably not see the Broncos, and I would definitely not see the Commanders or the Giants from that NFC East perspective. So when breaking down the West, everyone knows what the Chiefs are. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to win this division. This division is not going to really put any resistance on the Chiefs this year. This is not a great challenge for the Chiefs. Like, the Chargers are not that talented. Yes, they have Justin Herbert. Yes, a lot of people are excited about Jim Harbaugh, but they do not have a lot of talent. Their receiving core is one of the worst in football, no matter what you think of Ladd McConkey, okay? The offensive line, yes, has improved, but really, you look at a couple running backs, they've signed a 1-year contracts from the Baltimore Ravens. That's what they're working with. The defense still has a lot of holes. So the Chiefs, the number one team that people think could maybe give them an issue is that Chargers team, right? Don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening. And we could continue with the Bolts here. Like, yeah, the offensive line is going to provide protection for Herbert, but like, I just see them as an inconsistent football team this year. I think Herbert is a really good quarterback, but he needs a couple reliable weapons to consistently separate and make plays. I think that the run game is going to be pretty effective. I think they're going to be able to play action some teams. I think they're going to be able to play some ball control. And I think that's where Herbert's skills are going to have to come into play. Can he make some big shot plays? Can he control the game at the line of scrimmage, right? And can the defense effectively play? And that's where I think that kind of sequencing of that team sort of falls apart. I don't think the defense is going to be talented enough. We can't really rely on Joey Bosa to consistently be on the field. Khalil Mack is still really good, but he is aging. The interior defensive line is kind of suspect. The linebacker position is young, I would say. The secondary, I think, is okay. I like the safeties quite a bit. Asante Samuel has been a bit up and down in his young career, and I don't think there are other corners on this team that really scream playmakers in the secondary. So I don't really view this defense as an above average unit with a kind of below average offensive supporting cast around a really good quarterback. So the Chargers, I just think, are limited right now. I think they need another offseason to really get to that level that people think they're going to get to this year. The Raiders are actually more talented than the Chargers, but the Raiders don't have the quarterback the Chargers have, which makes them not a real threat to the Chiefs. They might be able to beat the Chiefs in one game because of how they play. They're going to play physical. They're going to play tough. They're going to play gritty. They're going to run the ball really well, I think, this year. Jackson Powers-Johnson was a great pickup. I love Brock Bowers in this offense. I think Gardner Minshew is being slept on once again going into another NFL campaign. I think he will be able to deliver the football to great talents like Devontae Adams, like Brock Bowers, like Jacoby Myers. And I think he'll be able to operate an offense that runs the ball, utilizes some play action, and spreads it around. And the odd screen pass, like, it's not going to be an overly, creative offense, but it's going to be old school power football. And I think that Minshew just won't turn it over. He'll make a couple throws to his big time receivers, and they'll be able to stay in games. I think their defense is pretty good at the defensive line with Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins. I think those two guys could single-handedly destroy football games, which is what their approach is going to be. They're very well coordinated on that side of the ball. Last year was a masterclass. I think that the linebackers are underrated. I think the secondary, Jack Jones, if he comes to play, he's got a lot of talent. Love Nate Hobbs as well. So I think the secondary is a little bit maybe kind of slept on, but the Raiders, it feels like they're pretty well reliably like a 7 to 10 win team. That's kind of what they feel like to me. They feel like they don't have the ceiling because they don't have the quarterback, but they have a lot of other, the other pieces. Like if they swapped Gardner Minshew for Josh Allen, we'd probably be talking about a team that would be in the AFC Championship conversation, right? With those receivers and that offensive line that I think is pretty underrated, a run game and an identity that way, and then a defense that's actually pretty crafty, creative with two studs up front. Like that's a team with a really good quarterback that could make some noise. But with Minshew, they're probably going to win about as many games as they lose. That's kind of how I view the Raiders. And then with the Denver Broncos, I've talked about them at length when it comes to, I just don't think they're going to be very good. I think they've lost key pieces to their recent past, especially Justin Simmons. I think that Sean Payton is kind of going through a rebuilding phase with this team, regretfully speaking. I think Bo Nix is not going to be any good, personally. I think that he is just going to be a bridge option to the eventual top 3 pick that they end up landing next year. They lost a really good center that will have to be replaced. I think their run game is fairly average. I think their offensive line is fairly average. I think the receiving core is probably below average outside of Cortland Sutton. They don't have much. The defense, I don't think, has one alpha edge rusher. I think that the corners are fairly average outside of Pat Surtain. I think, you just look at the roster and it's like they don't have a lot to lean on. They don't have a lot of reliable options. Maybe Zach Allen and John Franklin Myers in the interior defensive line can provide some pop. And I do think the coaching is pretty solid on both sides of the ball with Vance Joseph on defense and Sean Payton on offense. And maybe they'll surprise some teams in that regard. But when you have to start a rookie quarterback most likely here, or a below standard starting quarterback like Zach Wilson or Jarrett Stidham, you're just not going to be able to win a lot of games because your quarterback's not going to make a lot of plays. You're going to have to rely on the other aspects, your team building, your roster to win those games, your defense, your offensive line, your run game. And they just don't have those aspects built up. So it's just going to be a tough time for the Broncos in 2024. I think this is a building year for them entering 2025. But that's how I feel about the AFC West. It's the Chiefs, and it's not a lot else. I almost don't have to speak about the Chiefs, but they're clearly an AFC contender. I do view them as a team that obviously they're going to have to get through some distractions once again with Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice is likely going to be suspended. So which receivers step up? Travis Kelce getting a little bit older. They probably want to save him as much as they can until the playoffs because that's what matters for the Chiefs at this point, right? So can Xavier Worthy really step in and be an impactful player from day one? Or is he just that speed threat that many people feared he might be? But I think he's more than that. So we'll see what they can get out of him right away. I think Marquise Brown is probably going to be that reliable option from day one, but can he stay healthy will be the biggest question for him, and how will they manage his reps in the offense? Can anyone else beyond those two at receiver make some plays? That's another question. Probably Watson is going to be in the mix as well. Maybe they can get more out of Sky Moore if he even makes the team at this point. And then offensive line we know is going to be pretty good. We're just wondering about the left tackle. Running backs, run game's going to be about the same as last year. Pat Mahomes, we know we reliably are going to get one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in football. And then defensively, I think they're going to be good. I just don't think they're going to be dominant like last year because of the loss of L'Jarius Sneed. I think having L'Jarius Sneed made their secondary so overpowered that it allowed them to play a style of play, man coverage, stack the box, that you just can't play without two elite corners. I still think they have good corners. I still think Trent McDuffie is awesome, don't get me wrong, but the other guys that are going to have to step up for Sneed, as well as, even safeties like losing Mike Edwards, losing a linebacker that could cover like Willie Gay, for example. Those are losses that will add up. I still think that the defense largely, though, is the same with many of the same pieces and should still be a top 10 unit in this league. So having a little bit better offense along with probably maybe even a lot better offense depending on how much they can get out of some of these pieces, and then a defense that's maybe a little bit worse should correlate to about the same team, if not a little bit better in the regular season, and then it will come down to the postseason for the Chiefs. But obviously we know what they are. It's just kind of sad that there's no other team in this division that's anywhere close to competing with them. The next division, the fifth best division in football entering 2024, is the AFC South. This one might be a little bit surprising because I think the South has made major strides entering 2024 in comparison to where I thought they were before 2023. I think that's a fact, right? Last year, they were arguably the worst division in football entering the season. This year, I think they're low-key like the most underrated division in football because you look at the Texans, who I think many people are regretful, or not regretful, I guess that's not the word, but they're a little bit slow. They're not able to quite get there with the Texans, where I'm at, which is this team is going to be a juggernaut. This team is going to be elite. This team is going to be a contender. A lot of people are still kind of holding out. Like, is CJ going to be that good in year two? Is he going to be even better? Is the O-line going to figure it out, right? Is Stephon Diggs really the difference? And is these defensive pieces really going to add up to success? And then when they actually spend a little bit more than a minute thinking about that, they probably clue into the fact that, yeah, it's probably going to work really well when you have an awesome young quarterback. You have the best receiving core in the NFL, arguably, and you have some dominant defensive line pieces with D'Amico Ryans. Like, those things tend to work. So the Texans are going to be awesome, and I would definitely see them as the favorite of this division. I think CJ Stroud could already be considered a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I think they've got a very solid tight end option in Dalton Schultz, a really good, reliable, older running back, but still really good in Joe Mixon. They've got really awesome receivers. Tank Dell coming back healthy. Stephon Diggs is still a number 1 in his own right, but complemented by Nico Collins, it's very, very dangerous. And then they even added good old Benny Skoranek from the Los Angeles Rams to help their special teams out. And the depth of their receiving core is probably a number 5 or number 6. But he's also added to the mix, probably with veterans like Robert Woods or another guy like John Mechie, whoever ends up making this team and supporting as their number 4 receiver. Then defensively, they've got, I think, probably the most underrated juggernaut of the defense in football. Like, this is why I'm sold on the Texans, because not only will they have an explosive, terrifying offense that can run and can throw and can really put you in a bind, but they're going to have a defense that's going to have one of the best defensive pass rushes in football, with Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, Denico Autry leading the way for D'Amico Ryans, who is going to coordinate, I think, a really talented defense that has fast-flowing linebackers with Harris and Al-Shaair, with a secondary that has a very good, potentially breakout number 1 corner in Derek Stingley, and quite a bit of depth at both safety and corner. So after the Texans as the favorites of the AFC South, The Indianapolis Colts immediately come to mind as a team that was very close to the playoffs last year that might be able to make it in 2024. Anthony Richardson is the quarterback that everyone is expecting to break out. The question is, can he stay healthy, and how effective and consistent can he be? That is the biggest question with Anthony Richardson. Can his mechanics remain, consistent? Can his accuracy be there? And how explosive can he be in Shane Steichen's offense with Jonathan Taylor, a pretty good offensive line, a really interesting rookie receiver, and then a very reliable number one in Michael Pittman, along with Josh Downs. There's plenty of options to create offense. Defense with Gus Bradley is always going to be fundamentally sound, but it's going to be the better teams in football, the better offenses in football that I think they struggle with. I don't think their secondary is all that talented, but their front seven is going to allow them to stop the run and potentially get after the quarterback, especially after they drafted Latu, my favorite pass rusher, in the first round. That pass rush with the guys that they now have, led by DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, and Kwity Paye, they're going to be tough to stop, tough to handle up front, which is going to allow their secondary to become better, strengthening a strength through the draft. But you do wonder when teams are able to block them, if they're able to hold up in the back end. So the Colts, I think, are a very wild card type of team. They could be really fun. They could be pretty inconsistent. They could be all over the map. They might make the playoffs. They might win this division at their absolute, peak outcome here. And if the Texans don't quite reach their potential, but I also could see them really disappointing and only winning 5 or 6 games because they're just not able to get that sort of flow and surprise on teams that they did last year, even with Gardner Minshew leading the way. And I could see the deficiencies of the defense kind of playing into this. Anthony Richardson getting injured again. Things could go wrong for them in a lot of different ways, but they could be all over the map. This is one of the more tough teams to project in 2024. The next team is the Jacksonville Jags. I think Jacksonville is really interesting this year with how Trevor Lawrence plays. I think Trevor Lawrence has not been discussed enough in terms of he was this generational prospect, this guy that a lot of people looked at as being the next great quarterback in the NFL coming out of college. And so far, he's just been okay, pretty good. Some people make him out to be better than he is. Some people maybe don't talk about him in a positive light enough, but he's been somewhere in between for me. And I think he's shown flashes of being a very good player, but it just hasn't all come together. I think in 2024, we might be able to see the best Trevor Lawrence and the best Jacksonville team led by Trevor Lawrence, which is more important than anything else. I think the offensive line on paper is looking pretty solid at the tackle positions, where these younger guys are getting into years where they should be pretty solid at this point. The interior should be more certain with Mitch Morse at center, and Travis Etienne is a reliable running back to get that ground game started for Doug Peterson. Brian Thomas Jr., I think immediately can be a really good receiver in the NFL, at least threatening defenses vertically, which will open up Etienne, Ingram, and also Christian Kirk underneath, along with Gabe Davis also being another reliable outside option. Devin Duvernay also in the mix there too as a returner and a receiver. Defensively, I think they're pretty solid. Josh Allen, I think Roy Robertson Harris, that is, along with Eric Armstead, if he can stay healthy, that's a big key. And then, of course, they have that first overall pick that a lot of people have forgotten about, Trayvon Walker, who's on the other edge. That might be low-key one of the better defensive lines in football this year if everyone's healthy and playing at their peak levels. Linebackers are pretty athletic, although inconsistent. I love Aluakon, but can they get more out of Devin Lloyd is a question. Secondary, I think, is maybe the unreliable, inconsistent aspect of this. But I do think Ronald Darby will provide certainty and veteran leadership and ability in the back end, along with having, at his peak, a really awesome number one corner and some pretty good safeties. I think Cisco is one of the more underrated ones in football. So I think Jacksonville, they just feel to me like a pretty good offense, a pretty good defense. And if Lawrence just plays like an elite quarterback for the first time in his career. I think he got close to that in 2022, I believe. But in 2024, can he get to an elite level where he's no doubt like an MVP, top 6, top 7 quarterback? This team could win 11 or 12 games. I wouldn't be that shocked by it. But they could also just stay at the same level if Lawrence isn't able to catapult himself into that stratosphere. That's kind of what I feel. But this is the most certain I've been about Jacksonville in terms of if things go right, they actually have higher end potential that I think people are really giving them this year. Tennessee also has drastic outcomes in terms of what they could be this year. I think Tennessee could be, a fun story that's actually like a Cinderella story team like kind of Indy was last year. But I could also see them still remaining as one of the worst teams in the AFC. It kind of comes down to Will Levis. How good is Will Levis? How consistent can he be? Can he kind of work on his consistency of accuracy, mechanics, and play in general? And then can they reliably get a more productive offensive line that's able to protect Will Levis and open up the run game for Spears and Pollard? Because they do have a very good offensive line coach now coming from Cleveland, Callahan, the father of the head coach, who is going to make them, I think, drastically better from day one. But the offensive line talent is still kind of a little underwhelming despite the draft picks that they have made. But they are a lot better on paper. There's no doubt about it. The receiving core is also super talented when you look at Calvin Ridley. You look at the addition of Tyler Boyd, look at DeAndre Hopkins, even his later years is still a good player, and then still Treylon Burks, and even a decent, really athletic tight end. So Tennessee is going to be a lot of fun on offense. They're probably going to have games where they go for 34, and they're probably going to have games where Will Levis throws 3 picks. But it's going to be very fun in that in-between space. Defensively, I think that they're probably not as good as their fans think they are, but I think they're a little bit better than most general NFL fans think, just because their secondary, I think, is really good at corner. Like, I think with Awuzie and Snead and McCreary, they're going to be able to cover. Now, my question is, will they be able to reliably get to the quarterback? Jeff Simmons, Harold Landry can do that, and occasionally Arden Key. But I don't think it's going to be one of the better, more overwhelming, productive pass rushes in football. I also think the linebacker position is arguably one of the worst in the NFL, and the safety position is still kind of iffy. So the middle of the defense, I think, is the weakness of the entire team in a lot of levels. If you expect Will Levis to be better than people think. And I think the run defense will probably be okay, but nothing special. So they can cover. Can they get home? And then can they really make those plays in the middle of the field? I'm concerned about that. But Tennessee, they could be better than I think. Right now, I think they're probably going to be like a 6 or 7 win team. And that's the team that I think might be the worst in the division. So honestly, the AFC South is going to be pretty darn competitive from beginning to end of this season. I think Tennessee is maybe a year or 2 away from really being good. I think the Colts need still some work on their defense. I think the Texans are going to be a juggernaut. I think Jacksonville is going to be better than people expect. So the AFC South is really, really interesting. At number 4, the NFC West. The NFC West grades a 62 for me. The NFC West is interesting because I think it's going to be better than last year, but I'm also not sure if the Niners are going to be as good, or if the Rams are going to be as good, or the Seahawks are going to be. Like, it's a weird conversation with the NFC West because I think the bottom is better. I think the Cardinals are going to be better than last year. I think the Rams, you could talk me into being better, but you could also talk me into them being worse. You could talk me into Seattle being better, but you could talk me into Seattle being worse. And you could talk me into San Fran could win the Super Bowl this year. You could also talk me into San Fran might take a step back this year. So it's a weird division, but it's a division that I think as an overall strength is pretty strong from top to bottom. And there's no team that you would really go into a game and say, we're easily going to beat that team. Even the Cardinals is a team where I'd say, well, we still got to worry about Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. That offense can score points, and if we're not careful, we might lose this game. So I view this division as pretty strong. Obviously, the Niners, I'm going to make a video about this, so I don't want to spend too much time on the Niners, but I just feel like a lot of people are not giving the respect to the Niners that they deserve. They've been to the NFC Championship last year, the year before that, and really the only year since 2019 they didn't go to the NFC Championship was because they didn't have their quarterback. All right, so like, and the other NFC Championship and against the Eagles, they literally lost their quarterback on like the second play of the game. So the Niners have been super consistent. The only team that's been better than them over this stretch since 2019 has been the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's been with multiple quarterbacks, because Kyle Shanahan is just that good of a coach. And I think they've been that good at producing talent and drafting talent and signing talent. And when you look at the roster, the offense is pretty much exactly the same, if not maybe a little bit better. When you add a third-round guard to the mix, you add a first-round receiver like Ricky Pearsall to the mix, you get deeper on your offense. And Brock Purdy is going to have a full offseason to work in this offense, which he hasn't had in his career yet, a full offseason uninjured, right? And then defensively, I think they're relatively the same from a kind of a player standpoint, right? I think they're a little bit better on the edge position with Floyd going in for Chase Young. They're a little bit worse in the interior at their best with Armstead over Malik Collins, but Collins doesn't get hurt nearly as much as Armstead, which I think was the kind of coordination there by John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, thinking about games missed. Linebacker level, they're a little bit deeper with Devondre Campbell, despite losing Greenlaw for probably a few games at the beginning of the year. And the secondary is a little bit deeper, once again, getting back Hufanga at safety, and then also drafting Renardo Green out of FSU, who I really, really like at corner in the second round. So they're going to be deeper at corner and safety. They're probably going to be about as good in the defensive line, but the big difference is going to be coordination, right? Coordinator on defense. And I think the defense is going to be better coached this year than it was last year. I think that was their biggest flaw. I also think Brandon Staley is going to add a little bit of flavor to that defense to kind of freshen it up from bird's view perspective. But I think the Niners, not enough people are really looking at this team and looking at our lads and saying like, well, what's really different about this team? Why should I be counting them out this year the way that I am? So I'm just putting that out there. But the Los Angeles Rams, they're weird because they lose Raheem Morris, they lose Aaron Donald, who are two massive pieces to their success in recent years. But they also, I felt like, got better in all the other areas. They got better at edge rusher in the first round. They at least tried to replace Aaron Donald in the second round. They added pieces at corner like Darius Williams and Tre'Davious White. They tried to add a safety in Cameron Curl. They tried to get better on the offensive line, right, with Jonah Jackson, which they did. So they have a lot of improvements, but they've also lost major names that made them good. So I still view them as a playoff team. I'm just not sure they're going to be that team that they were when they won the Super Bowl, where they're like going to make a real Super Bowl run. I could maybe see them winning a playoff game, but I don't really see them getting further than the NFC divisional round, but that's how I view the Rams. Then you've got after that the Seattle Seahawks, who I think are a borderline playoff team, but I still am worried about aspects of the roster. I think Geno is just a fairly average quarterback, so he's not really going to uplift the offense, but he's not going to be a problem. The offensive line is worrisome for me. I think that all aspects of it is concerning, really at every level, guard, center, tackle even. I love Kenneth Walker, though. I love the running backs and what they can bring. I think that DK is a stud. I think Tyler Lockett's good, and Jackson Smith and Jigba should take a step. I think Noah Fant is maybe going to have the best season of his career. I think he's really trending in the right direction. And defensively, Mike McDonald can coach, man, so I'm not too concerned about that side of the ball. I think they'll actually be better there, especially with a stud like Devin Witherspoon in year 2 and Nwosu back and healthy. The linebacker changes, I think, are about the same. I think the defensive line is going to be really tough with Leonard Williams, Draymond Jones, and then the first round pick added to the mix out of Texas. So I think they've got the makings of being an underrated defense, along with a pretty explosive offense. I just think the offensive line is holding me back. So I could see them as a wild card team for sure. Or, again, a 9-win team like they were last year. And I brought up the Cardinals. So this is a team that could feature 3 playoff teams in the NFC. I wouldn't be that shocked. So that's why the NFC West is number 4. At number 3, the AFC East. The AFC East is similar to the NFC West, a little bit different. I think they have one team that is clearly below everyone else, the Cardinals, the Patriots, and then they have 3 teams that I could see making the playoffs. But in the AFC East, I think it's more the fact that they're all going to be like playoff teams and pretty compelling playoff teams. The NFC West is like the Niners are clearly a contender. Then the Rams and the Seahawks. The Rams are maybe obviously a step above the Seahawks. They're like a pretty interesting playoff team. And then the Seahawks are like, they're probably not going to make the playoffs, but they have a chance. The AFC East, it's like Buffalo could win this division. Miami could win this division. The Jets could win this division. And then, hey, the Patriots, like the Cardinals, could be kind of sneaky better than people think. So that's kind of how I view the AFC East. But you start with the team that's been kind of dominating this division, the Buffalo Bills. You've got one of the best quarterbacks in football, and when you have one of the best quarterbacks in football in Josh Allen, you're going to be competitive. So it doesn't really matter. You're going to win a lot of games. You're going to win 9, 10, 11 games this year. It's just a matter of how is everyone else around him. And I brought up my concerns in previous videos about the team itself, the roster itself. But I could buy into Buffalo being as good as last year. There's no doubt about it. And that's what I was trying to say in my teams that are getting worse is like, I'm going to bring up both arguments. With Buffalo, I can see both sides. I could see them getting younger on defense, faster on defense. I can see how they might be healthier because of that. I could see how the offense, with a new shift in identity and a full offseason to operate that identity, and with the lack of number 1 receiver actually paying off for them. But I could also see where those things don't help them because they don't have reliable players in those positions that they used to have. They don't have a reliable wide receiver 1. We don't know who that's going to be. We don't really think that the offensive line is stellar, and we definitely kind of don't think the defense is as good as it once was at its peak. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't be solid, but it's probably not great. So it's a lot of Josh Allen having to carry the load. So for Buffalo, I just view the ceiling of this team not being as high as previous years, including last year. But I also view it as a team that's still going to be good. I still will pick them to make the playoffs. It's just a fact of like, because I don't know who they have as reliable receivers, because I think the offensive line is just average, because I think the run game is just average, because I think that the defense is probably pretty good, but not great. They just don't have enough outside of Josh Allen for me to be like, that's my Super Bowl team. They're going to win the AFC Championship. They're probably going to make the AFC wild card. They might lose. They might win a playoff game and then lose. Like, that's kind of how I view the Bills this year. They're more like how I viewed Miami in last year. So then we've got Miami. The Miami Dolphins, I think, are probably a little bit worse than last year in terms of overall talent. I just think the offensive line and the defensive line are just critically not there. They're just, and I brought this up in my teams that got worse. Losing Christian Wilkins, right? Losing Raekwon Davis, losing Robert Hunt, losing Connor Williams. Those are key foundational pieces that not a lot of fantasy football players know. They know Odell, right? They know Jalen Ramsey. They know probably even Kendall Fuller, like some of the additions they've made. But when you think about the offensive line and the defensive line pieces that they've lost, I just don't think they're going to be as good as last year. I also think that another year goes on where Tyreek Hill gets a little bit older, Raheem Mostert gets a little bit older, Jalen Ramsey gets a little bit older, and then Mike McDaniel's offense kind of has to find more and inventive ways to continue to push this thing forward, and teams kind of studying them and kind of understanding what gives Tua issues, like what we saw in certain matchups last year. So with Tua being a guy where he's good in the system, but he's not a guy that is great separate the system, right? Can he continue to improve his game and not kind of have him being relying upon that system to kind of be what makes them super effective on offense? And that's just my personal take. And then along with the offensive line being unreliable and probably inconsistent is going to drive me nuts watching this team, because some games they're probably going to go off. And some games, they're probably going to be really frustrating. And, Jalen Waddle, can he stay on the field more consistently this year? Is OBJ going to bring anything? Is Jonnu Smith going to bring anything? Is, Wright out of the backfield? Are they going to get more out of him? Is A-Shane going to take that next step? Defensively, what are they going to get from the edge rushers? What are they going to get from, when is Chubb back? When is Phillips back? Is Chop Robinson able to step up? So this team is just a big fat question mark. They have a lot of talent everywhere except for the line of scrimmage, which makes them super tough to kind of understand what they can be. But I think that they're going to be a borderline playoff team. I could see them making it. I could also see them missing it. That's kind of how I see Miami. The New York Jets are the ultimate wild card in terms of the New York Jets. What the fuck? The New York Jets are that ultimate wild card. This team could win the division this year. This team could win the Super Bowl this year. The AFC, all of it. If Aaron Rodgers is back to MVP form off the Achilles. If this defense is as good as we've seen it perform the last couple of years. Breece Hall, Mike Williams, Garrett Wilson, the addition of Tyron Smith to the offensive line, the reworking of the entire offensive line, right? The right tackle in Morgan Moses. They added another layer of depth through the draft. This team has all of the talent, but their biggest concern is coaching. I don't love Hackett. I don't love Robert Saleh as a leader of men, as a leader of a professional football team. I think he's an okay defensive coordinator. I am not sold on the health of the quarterback and how good Aaron Rodgers is going to be, and then the coaching, which is the main foundation of what a championship team should be. That being said, they are so absurdly talented that if they put it together, they could be in the Super Bowl. And if they make the playoffs, they are going to be tough. In that type of football, the physical conditions of it, where the refs let you get away with a little bit more holding, the fact that they are able to run the ball, the fact that Aaron Rodgers can control a game at the line of scrimmage and make the necessary throws on big third downs, the fact that they have a really strong secondary and a very good pass rush is going to give a lot of teams fits. So the New York Jets, all you have to know is that they could be awesome. And I am more so leaning into they're probably going to be darn good. I think they're going to win 10, 11 games. If Aaron Rodgers is just pretty good, I think that's probably the outcome for this team. I just am not sure if they're going to be able to max out their potential with this coaching staff. Then the final team is the New England Patriots, a team that, of course, my team. I think if they start Jacoby Brissett with this roster, they're probably going to win 4 or 5 games. I just don't think the quarterback in Jacoby Brissett is going to be able to get them enough offensive production for them to be good enough, to win a lot of games. I love the defense. I think it might be the best defense in the NFL this year. I really think that highly of this defense. They showed that last year near the end of the season. They showed that they could keep them in every game. But at a certain point, if your offense cannot separate, your offense cannot reliably run the ball, if your offense cannot reliably block, if your offense cannot get plays from your quarterback, you are going to just not be that good of a team. And that's what we saw last year in the New England Patriots. It was evidence, proof in the pudding. But if this team starts or eventually gets to Drake May, and Drake May is the type of player where I think even if he struggles and throws more interceptions or turns the ball over or takes more sacks than Jacoby Brissett, I think our defense is good enough to bail him out. And I think he will make more throws, more plays with his legs, and more high-end plays where he'll be able to steal games, even with less around him, because he's that type of guy that can uplift others around him with a great throw, with an off, platform throw, with a scramble, with a extend of the play. And then you could talk yourself into this offense could be able to run the ball pretty well. This offense could be pretty good off play action. Maybe one of these rookie receivers step up. Maybe they have enough at these skill positions to get it done if the quarterback is a little bit better than people think. The defense is going to be awesome. I see the Patriots, somewhere around probably 5 to 8 wins. But if Drake May is CJ Stroud of 2024, all of a sudden nobody knew who Nico Collins was last year until it ended up taking place. So I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. The Patriots are sort of being a little bit slept on just because they do have a side of the ball that we know is going to be really good. And you can't say that for every team. At number 2, the NFC North. The NFC North is the bona fide, locked and loaded, easy number 2 division in football. The NFC North got a lot better this offseason because the Chicago Bears are real. The Chicago Bears last year, by the end of the season, were a legitimate threat to make the playoffs, and that was with Justin Fields and a lesser receiving core. And now they've got Caleb Williams, a magician of a quarterback, and potentially a really fun rookie quarterback that can make a lot of dynamic plays, maybe some mistakes, but a lot of dynamic plays that are going to lead to a lot of fun and a lot of electricity. And they've got a receiving core that's going to be tough to cover week in and week out with DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen. I mean, man. And then on top of that, they added DeAndre Swift out of the backfield as a guy that can run routes, then also run the football. And then, just a better offensive coordinator, I feel like, and Shane Waldron, a defense that was pretty darn good by the end of the year, maybe being a little bit overrated, let's be fair, but I still think is pretty good and very foundation, just like technically sound under Matt Eberflus. A pretty good run defense, a solid enough pass rush, and a secondary that I think is slept on, along with a couple really good linebackers in the middle. So the Chicago Bears are going to be improved this year without a doubt, and they could make the playoffs. I mean, I think the Bears' high end could be like 10, 11 wins. Like, I wouldn't stretch to 12, but I think their potential is probably 10, 11 wins, probably wild card team, second best team in this division, and like, woof, look out, this team is going to be the team of the future. Their low end, though, could be kind of disappointing, where they're winning like 7 games and Caleb's turning it over, taking too many sacks, kind of like Justin Fields 2.0 in that regard. And then the offensive line is kind of falling apart, and the receiver, maybe Keenan Allen gets hurt, or maybe the defense just regresses overall, and Matt Eberflus gets fired because it's not working, and Caleb Williams is becoming a drama queen, and all those things could happen. But I think their potential definitely exists, no doubt. The Minnesota Vikings are, how do I even describe them? They're that team that I think is reliably going to be competitive. I'm just not sure what their competitiveness will lead to. Will it lead to a bunch of close games, but they only win 5? Or will it lead to a bunch of close games, but they win 9? I'm not really sure what the Vikings are going to bring in terms of that, but I know that their coaching is going to be excellent on both sides of the ball. I know that their home field is really, really good. I know that they're going to be able to run the ball fairly well with Aaron Jones, I think. I think that Justin Jefferson's going to catch a lot of passes. I think that they have really good weapons in Hawkinson and then a second-year pretty dynamic number 2 receiver. And the offensive line is underrated. Who's the quarterback? Is it Sam Darnold? Is it J.J. McCarthy? I tend to believe it's going to be Sam Darnold to start, and I think he'll be okay. And then I think at a certain point, J.J. McCarthy is going to get his way into the action. But the question will be, in that early portion of the season, is the defense playing well enough for them to kind of win the offense some games where maybe they're a little bit up and down because of the quarterback play? So the defense, I think, was a lot of smoke and mirrors last year. I definitely think they improved a lot of their talent up front in their pass rush, especially, even underrated ads like Jerry Tillery. But then you add to the edge rush like Dallas Turner. You add Jonathan Grenard, who replaces Daniil Hunter. And then you add Andrew Van Ginkel, my favorite signing of them all. And then Blake Cashman at linebacker gets you really athletic in the inside. And then the secondary, I think, is young and ascending. And I think the Vikings are just going to be one of those teams that you have to keep an eye on because of the young quarterback position, the coaching that they do possess, and some of the new improvements and some of the players they have, right? They're going to be a lot of fun. So the Vikings, I think, are going to be one of the better last teams in their division this year. They're going to be like a 6 or 7 kind of range type of team, in my opinion, just as I see it right now, just due to the quarterback just not quite being there yet. And then the other teams, you've got the Lions and the Packers, who I view as locked and loaded. It's easy. Put it in pen, put it in marker, permanent Sharpie, that the Lions and the Packers are going to be in the playoffs. That's how I feel about these teams. I think the Lions are going to be a contender to win the Super Bowl. I think their offensive line is excellent. I think that their run game is excellent. I think Ben Johnson is excellent. I think he can go toe-to-toe with any coordinator in football and scheme a good game plan. I think Dan Campbell is a very good messenger, a very good hype man. I think Jared Goff is a good quarterback, not a great quarterback, but a good one. Congratulations on the contract. I think that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be one of the most dynamic and fun running backs in football. Amon-Ra and Laporta are a lot of fun. Can Jamison Williams take a step forward? I think he might be able to. And defensively, I think they're going to be a lot better because I think their coverage is going to be a lot better. I think they got more talent with Carlton Davis, with Arnold. I think that they're going to be reliable in terms of their coverage in the back end. They're going to play some man, some zone. They're going to mix it up. I think that Aaron Glenn is actually an underrated coordinator with what he brings to the table. He brings a lot of different looks. I think the front seven with DJ Reader added to the mix, they're going to be tough to run the ball on, man. And if Campbell, it's Campbell, right, can take a step forward in the linebacker position. Is it Campbell? I don't even remember. Anyways, the linebacker that they drafted last year, I don't know why I can't remember if that's his name. But anyways, can he take a step forward as a cover guy? Because I think that's kind of what they're missing in terms of that coverage. Anzalone's okay, but that coverage, that range, that ability to cover the middle of the field, especially against the Packers and the Niners, like that's pretty crucial. But the Lions are going to be really good. I think tough at the line of scrimmage, reliable coaching on both sides, well schemed, and just an identity that's thorough. The Green Bay Packers, I think, are going to be electric. A lot of fun on offense. I think they're going to be bombs away at certain points. I think they're going to run the ball well. I think their offensive line is always good. I think Jordan Love's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in football this year, top 10. I think that they've got all these different weapons to attack you with, which makes them very hard to scheme against. Is it Watson? Is it Dobbs? Is it Wicks? Is it Reed? Is it Musgrave? Is it Josh Jacobs, A.J. Dillon? Who is going to be the guy that they go to on a certain play? And then defensively, I think their coaching is going to be better, more creative, and I think that's going to get more out of their front seven and their pressure. I think also their secondary is going to be better thanks to Xavier McKinney in the back end. So I love what they've done with this team. It's young, it's uplifting, and they've got a great vibe about them. And Matt LaFleur is going to have fresh haircuts for every single one of their wins, which is a lot of fun. So the Green Bay Packers are number 2 within the NFC North, the number 2 division in the NFL. The best division in the NFL is the AFC North. The AFC North is easily the best division in the NFL, according to my grading, with a 37 on the team rankings combined. All 4 teams only equated to a 37, which is super sick. I think the worst team I had in my power rankings was the Steelers, and they were like 15 or something like that. So yeah, it's crazy. They got 2 teams in the top 6. They got the Browns at number 12, I believe. So I could see all 4 of these teams making the playoffs. I wouldn't say I could see all 4 of these teams winning the division. I could see 3 winning the division. I can't see the Steelers, just to be honest, winning the division, but I can see the Steelers making the playoffs. I could see the Browns winning the division, but I could also see the Browns missing the playoffs. I could see the Bengals winning the division, the Ravens winning the division, and I could see the Bengals or the Ravens making the Super Bowl. So this division is stacked. 2 elite quarterbacks in here, one of the best defenses in the NFL in here in the Browns. And then you also talk about what the Ravens defense was last year, probably not quite as good this year thanks to the loss of Mike McDonald along with Jadeveon Clowney and Geno Stone and others. The Ravens on paper are the team that has regressed the most, but they were also the best team in the division last year, right? With the MVP quarterback, and they also did add a Derrick Henry. And, they did do some things that make you say, the cornerback position, first round, getting a kid that I really, really like out of Clemson. So they did some things where they did upgrade, but they also declined on the offensive line. They declined at the edge rush position. They declined at linebacker. They declined at safety. But they got better at corner. They got better at running back. And year 2 of an offensive coordinator along with Zay Flowers in year 2, Mark Andrews healthy. There's aspects where you believe the Ravens are going to be just as good or not, maybe better. And Lamar might still be that elite MVP type player. Maybe not get that trophy, but still be in that range. So the Ravens, I think, are going to make the playoffs. I just wonder if they're going to be the number 1 seed. Probably not, right? But the Bengals are, I think, going to be super dangerous this year. I think they're going to be a Super Bowl contender. They might win the Super Bowl. The offensive line's the best Joe Burrow's ever had. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins has to be taken seriously. They got a pretty real number 3 from the draft. And I love the additions of Mike Gesicki. And then also the running backs, I just think are underrated. I like Chase Brown quite a bit. Zach Moss is decent. And I just think they're going to be able to reliably protect Burrow for the first time ever, maybe. And even Mims having to go in there should be fine. So the defense is maybe more suspect, but I really believe in their coaching on defense. I also think they've got a lot of chemistry and continuity built within the defense. And I like the depth of the secondary, especially the safety position, and the re-addition of Von Bell, along with the addition of Geno Stone. I think Mike Hilton can still play, and I think Cam Taylor-Britt gives them a real number 1 corner. I think their defensive line, although they did lose DJ Reader, is deeper and potentially better than last year. I'd still like them to add another veteran at any level of their defense to really boost it, especially corner would be nice. But I think that they're looking really good and a team that can definitely go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs in any setting. And then you've got the Browns and the Steelers. And the Steelers improved at quarterback, offensive line, and that's 2 of the more important areas. They also improved their defense with a guy like Pat Queen. You can't remember that. You can't forget that. You can definitely remember that. So the Steelers, they've got Mike Tomlin. Somehow Voodoo Magic wins 9 games every year. And then you've got Russell Wilson or Justin Fields definitely being an upgrade over Kenny Pickett, who's now a backup quarterback. You've got a probable good running game with Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, and a good offensive line. They just drafted another stud out of Washington to play probably left tackle, but he could also slide into the inside if they want him to. They've got good guards, a young right tackle in Broderick Jones, who I think is going to be a really good player, a reliable tight end, a good number 1 receiver in George Pickens, and not a lot of depth at receiver, but I think with what they want to be, a run-centered offense that has a good defense, a number 1 receiver with a reliable tight end is quite a bit enough, especially when you complement that with running backs who can also catch the ball. So I think the loss of Deontay Johnson is a little overrated. The defense, I think, is going to be able to rush the quarterback as long as TJ Watt's there. Let's not forget what he brings. Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, Queen is just going to be such a difference maker for them in terms of athleticism, speed, range, coverage. Minka is another speed, range, coverage guy at safety. And Porter is probably the best, most potential number 1 corner that they've had in a while. So the Steelers are really, really good. It's just the quarterback thing is kind of holding them back for me. And then the Cleveland Browns are similar. Really good roster, really good coaching. They did lose an offensive line coach that I think is critical in Callahan, but they've got so much talent on the offensive line, you kind of wonder how much that really hurts them. Nick Chubb's back. Deshaun can't be any worse. And they did add the receiving core with Jerry Jeudy. They've got a lot of talent there. But Njoku, Cooper, Elijah Moore, they've got a lot of options for Deshaun Watson. Can he step his thing up? Defensively, Schwartz runs a good ship there on defense. Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, studs. A lot of depth on the D-line, a lot of depth in the secondary. Just one of the better defenses in football on paper. They don't have kind of like the reliable nature of Mike Tomlin, but they have the high-end potential, I think, that is in line with Baltimore, in line with Cincinnati. If Deshaun finds his way back to playing good football, this is a very dangerous team. I just wonder if he'll ever get back to that. But the AFC North is still a super solid team. They won 11 games last year, the Cleveland Browns did, with Joe Flacco, who, yes, played really well, but it's Joe Flacco at like 50. And they did have a beat-up offensive line, and they did have, a lot of pieces in and out of the lineup on defense, running back, receiver, etc. So this is a loaded division, top to bottom. All these teams could make the playoffs, and that's why they're the number 1 division in football. Thank you guys for watching this extensive breakdown of every division and my rankings for the worst to the best division in the NFL. Hope you guys enjoyed this long conversation. If you did, Gronk spike that like button. Let me know in the comments if you stayed till the end. Give me a comment like BLV is the best for rankings. Say that in the comments. Thanks guys for watching. Peace.